Hi, welcome to the Gooder Podcast. I'm your host, Diana Freich. As partner and CMO of Retail Voodoo, an award-winning branding agency, I've met and worked with some of the most amazing women in the naturals industry, food and beverage and wellness. As such, I decided to create the Gooder Podcast to interview these great people and subject matter experts and have them share their insights, expertise, to basically help businesses all around the world become gooder. So today I'm really excited to introduce my guest, Ayeshah Abuelhiga. Did I get that right?
You did.
Excellent. She is the CEO and founding partner of Mason Dixie Foods, the fastest growing frozen baked goods company in the US. Ayeshah has thrown out the rule book. Yes, thank you, girl, to excel in a male-dominated industry. She was voted one of Entrepreneurs Magazine's 100 Powerful Women in 2020, as well as one of the top 100 women in grocery 2020 by Progressive Grocer, and a top 10 DC innovator in 2017. She has worked front of the house positions for major fine dining restaurants and hotels, while also consulting and managing marketing and business development projects for Fortune 500 companies such as Microsoft, Toshiba, and Audi. So a pretty well-rounded person here. One of her biggest professional accomplishments is hiring a really diverse team of 15, each of whom shares her commitment to providing the best frozen baked goods in the world. Welcome, Ayeshah. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm great. Thanks for having me, Diana.
You are welcome. And you're in Baltimore, right?
I am.
Yes. And how's Baltimore? I know that's a little tricky question for today, may not be relevant in the future or might be, but how is everybody kind of feeling okay over there right now?
I think so. You know, it's the greatest city in America. It's plastered all over our benches for a reason. So, you know, whatever gets thrown our way, we're Baltimoreans. We just get over it. We get stronger. So
excellent. So before we get too much into our kind of like our topic today, which we'll mention in a moment, why don't you give us a quick history of Mason Dixie Foods? Why did you create the brand, and why does it exist outside of just the product?
Yeah, so, you know, I guess where do I even start? When I was really little, growing up here in Baltimore, my parents actually used to own like a carry-out restaurant. And this memory still sits with me to this day because I remember being really little and watching people come into the shop, and it'd be anyone, you know, business suits, it'd be, you know, construction workers, it'd be, you know, poor folks, homeless people, whatever, right? And really the draw was comfort food, right? Who doesn't like fried chicken, collard greens? I mean, even if you're vegan, they're making vegan chicken nuggets, right? Because people love fried chicken. So it was one of those things where it was like a cross-sectional, transcendental thing that I thought really unified people. And then, you know, growing up, I grew up, you know, in a low-income community in Section 8 housing in Baltimore. And, you know, as I got older, this has always been something lingering in my mind. I thought it was a sacrilege to watch people I grew up with that I, you know, now being back, I know where they are, and they're, you know, still in the system. They're still circulating through that cycle of poverty and lack of access. And when I really think about it, I'm like, what is the root causality of this? And I still to this day believe that it really has, you know, that whole, the turn of phrase is, you are what you eat.
Yes.
That's real.
Yeah.
And,
absolutely.
You know, I think about my mom, no matter how busy she was, you know, we were latchkey kids. You know, even when she couldn't do it, I made sure that me and my sisters had a balanced lunch, you know, every day. And we had a very balanced dinner with, you know, multicultural family, got all kinds of balance there. But, you know, it was how we stayed fed and stayed healthy. And that's why we got straight A's. That's why we went and progressed into our career paths. But the folks that didn't, that I remember eating out of a vending machine or, you know, dollar lunches in school, I mean, they still are in that cycle. And I truly do believe it has to do with what you eat. So, you know, as I kind of progressed through my career, and realized there was a glass floor, not a ceiling. I hate when people say ceiling. That assumes that women had the chance to begin with. You know, it got to me, and I just decided it was time for me to start out on my own. I'd always wanted to own my own business. Maybe it comes from my parents. And then when I realized that this problem that I had experienced as a kid was still there, and it was getting worse and worse, when I looked at the food that I grew up with, the food that I saw my mom make, and then I was looking at the cross section of restaurants and how that, you know, the fast casual world was growing. I saw that there was a huge opportunity in Southern comfort food because I thought it was a sacrilege that Chick-fil-A and KFC are the global visions of American comfort food. So it was a big opportunity to say, that's not how my mom made it. That's not how anyone's mom made it. How the heck did we get there? So I wanted to change that and turn it upside down on its head. So for me, it became more of a mission than just a better biscuit, right? It's a better for you biscuit that just kept growing, right? So I think that's why today it's so important to me to keep maintaining the brand standard of being that better for you, home baked happiness brand we want to be.
Yeah, super great. And I think if you might remember, because, you're going to remember everything I said in your busy world, but, the big goal of the bigger now not so secret goal, because I've been talking about it more and more in these conversations, is, the naturals industry has kind of created a bubble in the last 3 years, and we're making better for you food for people who are already healthy and have means and have access and have education. And there is a disconnect between the products that we are innovating versus what actually is needed out in the marketplace. And I really believe that there's a larger group of people who have a need there's a larger group of people that have a need to gain access and education than there are the people that have access. And the big disconnect is, you're not going to get somebody who's been eating Cheetos and drinking Mountain Dew. Not that you can't do that, but you can't, if that's their regular diet, you can't get them to move from there to kale chips and kombucha in one swing. And you got to start with the basics, the stuff that they grew up with. And I love this commitment to, like, I'm going to make the food that I grew up with legit. Like, let's start with the real food, the best way that we can. And if we can get people back there, then we can move that journey forward a little bit, one baby step at a time. But I think it is 100%. Took that real food, we went backwards. We got addicted, I'm going to say, to that backwards phase. And now we have to kind of go backwards and fix it all up.
That's exactly right. I remember this conversation because you're probably one of the first people I talked to that, like, it clicked, right? There is a bigger, broader issue than just what everyone's labeling as innovation, right? Yes, I'm super grateful for functional beverage. I'm super grateful for the wonders of CBD and the healthiness of vegan. But the reality is, like you said, the distance between what I know and what I can afford and what I grew up on to do you even know what functional beverage is? I mean, that's a 2020 word, right? That's too far of a cry, and it is elitist, right? It is elitist in many ways to assume that somebody who's growing up on dollar lunches, or on food stamps, on the WIC programs, are really going to take that splurge, even if some of these items are on WIC, right? Are they going to take the splurge to go and try to get it when they have no idea if they'll like it and if it actually does what it says it's going to do? That's the other thing, the skepticism around a lot of these new products, right? So for me, familiar food is at the pinnacle of everything we do. We don't produce anything that is, far-fetched or like innovative in terms of never been seen by a human eye kind of thing. I think familiarity is crucial. It's why the best-selling items in food still pertain to be, pizza, burgers, fries, that's it, right?
Well, and we're making analogs to the favorites: veggie burgers, plant-based burgers, plant-based fish, plant-based. I mean, it's like, if we're making analogs, there is some reality benchmarked in, like, everybody wants comfort to that.
Amen.
Yeah. So what I would just absolutely loved about when I was talking to you was just this fire you had inside you. Even though it was like, we're like mid-December, I think we're talking, you're exhausted, you're in like the busiest time of your year, and here you are just full of fire. And I want to just kind of I want to talk about the fact that I mean, obviously in my role and in your role too, we meet loads and loads of other women in the industry. And yet I think there's a lot of second guessing, a lot of insecurity around what's right and what's not right, and around decision making. And I don't get that from you, at least not now. Maybe it was there in the very beginning, but where does that come from? Is that just part of your DNA? Is that part of your family? Or is that like test and learn, maybe a combination of all of it?
It's probably a combination. I mean, I will say my dad was a very headstrong, stubborn, total misogynist guy who got blessed with being a princess maker and, had 3 daughters. And, every day he'd say, oh, I wish one of you were a boy. Oh, you know what? You're going to have to act like the boy because, that was the thing. He was so scared if I was just some gentle flower, I'd get pushed over. So he always told us, be a leader, not a follower. And he always said, if someone hits you, you hit them back harder. And that's that's the philosophy. And obviously, I'm not a violent person, but it translates, right? So, if I believe in something, I fight for it. If I disagree, I kindly disagree, right? Everyone's entitled to their opinions, but when it comes to decision making, I think having that kind of confidence instilled in you as a little girl, it grows and it gets more mature with age, right? I think also, growing up in male-dominated fields, right? I started out in tech, obviously not very female-centered, and to this day, still very controversially not female-centered. I think, remember Google said that women can't do this job. And then there was, working in automotive, same thing. It's not a girl's world. So what I think ends up happening is women who are headstrong end up always getting used to having to have an arsenal of substantiating points behind every argument, right? Because you're never smart enough to take at face value. You got to have proof points for everything. So, but I think that makes us better business people and leaders. I don't make any rash decisions. I want to know every angle. I want to know every risk. And I make my decisions soundly based on facts, not just some guy's gut because he's been in the industry for 30 years and that's what goes. And you'd be surprised. I mean, to this day, much of the decision making in this country that in male dominated industries still is a gut check. They hire a tiger guy who's got a big personality who they think can field, catch that ball and take it home. But when they hire women in C-level positions, it's usually a fixer because there's been so much residual damage from the last guy. She's got to clean it up, and women like to clean, right? Because that's what we do. And then, in future forward, if they are a good leader, everyone questions her to death to make sure she's thought it through. Like, have you really thought about have you really thought, how many times have you heard a guy say to another guy, have you really thought about it?
Yeah. No, I haven't. I mean, I've been witness to it. I think I might be a little bit older than you are. I don't know. I'm in my late 40s now at this point, but I mean, those things have changed. I used to be questioned far more than I am now. And I don't know if it's because my age or because business is changing a little bit. Maybe you have a POV on that.
I mean, I definitely think it's changing. I'm blessed and I'm very lucky, I think, now to have found, white-haired men who respect women and respect women as leaders. Like one of our lead investors only invests in women-owned businesses because he genuinely believes we're better business people and better leaders. So, and that's the thing. I mean, with age, and I think reasonable men have realized this, right? And I shouldn't say this, but one of my investors had this HR role that he said was unspoken, and he said, "Don't tell anybody," but I think it's great. He said they had this like HR recruitment mantra, and it was a few good men, ... only a few. And it was hilarious because no matter what position they tried to fill, they wanted to make sure that it was female first because we're harder workers. Same reason we just talked about. And that you really only position men in positions where you need one or they don't have control, but they are a bull, right? They can take the ball. And, it's funny because I just think I think that dynamic is what's happening. And despite all the chaos in the world the last 4 years too, I think that the positive thing is that I think women, people of color, we finally fought a little harder, right? Stasis is dangerous. And so, here comes Agent Orange and the disruptiveness of all of that. And it's, it really made people rethink how much sitting on my ass do I do versus getting up and talking about this.
And, you don't always have to be, I think it's tough, being a woman. You have to have a certain, you have to stand up a little bit more, but then also, you're a woman and a woman of color. And it feels like every label I'm going to use requires that much more energy to prove yourself. It's irritating it's irritating that it's been that way, but I think you're right. I think the last 4 years, a lot of people have said, "Oh my goodness!" I want to say the last 12 months has just been enough where there wasn't enough time to put just a general healing over, because we have these big events that happen, but 2020 was like cut and then cut again and then cut again, and it's like to the point where you can't be blind anymore. I mean, you can't choose to be blind. You can't be apathetically blind. And I think you're right. And men are really great in lots of different roles, and women, I think, have been not given all the right opportunities. And when we work together, it's such a powerful combination. I know that you have men that are working your organization, and their strength in that. It's when we say it's going to be all this way or it's going to be all that way that it becomes super dangerous. And I think not profitable and not powerful.
100%. I always, I love and I hate, I think I told you this the last time we chatted, but I love and I hate going to all women events, because I love it, because I love being in the room with a bunch of dynamic women. I love the energy. We speak our language. But then I hate that we come up with all these solutions, and the only people that it should be targeted towards are the people that are not in the room. So it's like, well, yeah, like She-Man Woman Haters Club, like it's like one of those things. So I think, I hope in the coming years that more companies realize, like, yes, it's awesome to be predominantly female or female run, but you got to convince the guys. Otherwise the system keeps going and it's us against them, right? There's more power in cooperation and collaboration than there is in us versus them.
Yeah, this kind of, I want to talk about this mold thing here, like you kind of being the breaking the rule books. And then this is really just more along the line of what we're talking about. But I think that some of this comes from, I mean, both of us have immigrant families, come from different backgrounds. And growing up, for me, we were different. I lived in the suburbs. We were like one of two immigrant families like that people had ever met. Now immigration is far more, and I hated being that different person at the time. Now I feel like it's my secret sauce or my secret weapon or whatever. And I wonder, do you feel the same in that way? And if you do, like, what advantages does that superpower give you?
It's funny. Yeah. I always classify too, by the way. I always think it's funny how people just classify immigrants in this one.
Oh, I know. Right.
And I don't. And it's funny because, like, people classify white immigrants as still white. I don't. I think white immigrants are very different from American multi-generational white people. They're just a very different philosophy. It's why Italians don't fit anywhere. It's like there's a reason for that. But I think what makes immigrant culture so strong is, like you said, I mean, you're fresh off the boat, you're trying to make a living, you don't have a choice but to grind. So that mentality, if you're a first or second generation, you're only a step away from, you didn't see anything more than your parents working hard as hell, right? So that gets ingrained in you. And I also, and like you said, to the negative is you're always different, right? No one could pronounce my name. I had teachers make up a name for me because they refused to pronounce it. So I've been anything from Ashley to Anastasia. And it got to the point even where my parents gave us all American middle names. So we all have like a very Anglo-Saxon. Mine's Julia.
I don't see you as Julia, but all right.
Yeah. And so, but they at one time did that and told me it was because of all this crazy shit where we had this, I had this one teacher that was trying to change my name. So they were like, maybe we should just switch your names. Maybe we should switch them to your middle names so that you're more Americanized. And I was like, first of all, how fucking weird is that going to be when I go into school and tell my friends, actually, my real name is Julia? No. Secondly, if you can't take 2 seconds to listen to me pronounce my fucking name, you don't deserve to say it. Right. So I quickly was like, I think there's a fight that ends up happening because it's a question about your identity in general. And I don't think, I think that's something that immigrants and people of color all have in common, whether or not they are immigrant generations of people of color. But it's this constant fight to hold on to your identity and prove yourself at all costs when the disrespectfulness of, groupthink hits. right? And that's, I think, also that negative experience builds a fire to preserve yourself no matter at all costs. And I think that's why we are the way we are.
Wow. That is, I'm like having a moment here because like I have never thought of it that way. I mean, I don't have your exact experience, but I have very similar experience and I've not heard it that way. And it's kind of, there's a little bit of an emotional hit there. Like, oh, that's what it is. Like you've just articulated it in a way that my emotions could never do that. You know, when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to.
Yeah. You don't analyze it. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And I think that's great. I think that people who are further, you know, here generationally, I think, if they can understand that that's also another thing that is going on in the back of your head, people of color, people that are immigrants, like all of that, that's yet another thing. Like it's your superpower, but it's also kind of like another thing in your backpack that you're carrying around all the time. Totally. Yeah. This kind of persistence and vision, I mean, it really, I can see this where the strength comes from, and I see how it's impacting you in business by this one story that I'm hoping that you'll be able to share with us. And that was just even when you were looking for a partner. And I don't know if this was to even create the brand in general, if it was just the design, it was the whole thing. But when you were looking to create the Mason Dixie land, you kept crashing into a scenario over and over again as you were talking to people. And I don't know if it's because the creative industry or the branding industry cuts corners or likes to do what it is, or if it's a US thing, or if it was that you weren't being heard because you were a woman, but can you tell that story and what it was, what the situation was, and maybe why you think you kept crashing into it?
Yeah, I always tell people, especially when folks are like, oh, I'm creating a new product and I want to get packaging done. Who did you use? And I say, that's the worst question you can ever ask. It's one of the biggest investments you'll ever make. And it's one of the most important first chances you get to expose the world to who your identity is. So you don't just pick what's somebody else is doing, because chances are they're going to give you what that other person did. And then it's not you. And now you're artificial and nobody gets it, right? Or they know that you are a copycat, or like, it's not who you want to be when you step out front for the first time. And so for me, it was, I need to find, and maybe this does come from being in big tech and auto with, $1 million budgets for all kinds of agency work, right? And I'm used to working with big agency, and that's also not very fun, right? Because you hire them because they had some kind of aesthetic, or, they had a tinge to them. That's why you go to them. And so that's what you get. You pay for what you get, right? But when you're an emerging brand and you're a startup and you're creating an identity for yourself, it's important to really think functionally about who you're trying to be. And so one of the things I quickly realized, like, for example, we're called Mason Dixie not because I'm celebrating the fucking Confederate South, clearly, right? It's, it's like, I grew up in Maryland and my business partners were Marylanders, and it sounded weird to say Maryland Biscuit Company. That's because I was obsessed, because most of the companies in the country actually that sold, restaurants that sold biscuits, they were Pine State Biscuit Company, like it was all these biscuits. So I was all right, let's do this. But Maryland's weird, and I don't want to make people think it's Old Bay, so I was all right. Well, what's there, and we had the benefit of being, I always say it's the land of opportunity, and the line between the freedom line is what I call it. But, the line of freedom was the Mason-Dixon line. So I was like, all right, that's positive, but I couldn't trademark Mason-Dixon. Right. So I was like, all right, well, how do I do this? And I was like, well, Dixie's a cute name. And I have like 3 friends named Dixie, and it's like this cute French name, apparently. So I was like, oh, it's cute and feminine. We're woman owned. And so we went with it. And then all of a sudden, all these like psychos in the last couple of years have come out and, said, you're a Confederate. I'm like, I'm the last person you can accuse of this. And secondly, I was like, this is crazy. So how do we create an identity that is real, right? And that really speaks to who we are. So first things first, I go out scouting for the top agencies. I specifically knew I wanted to tell a story and not just be a product company. We're a brand. So I sought out good storytelling agencies. And, I interviewed 17. Of the 17, oh, girl, because there's a lot there, because there's lazy folks. There's folks that want to mold you into what they're good at. There's folks that need you to be a certain way so that it's easier for them, right? So, of the 17, only 4 listened to me, like truly listened. And one of the things I said was, don't come at me with some nostalgic brand story around Southern cuisine. First of all, I'm not from the South. Second of all, I don't look like the poster child for Southern living. And I don't know how to tell that story. So if you paint that picture and they see me, this is going to be real fucking weird. Right. So I was like, listen to the story. If you can listen and tell it better in less words than I have to do every single time, then I know you got it. So out of the 4 that listened, only 2 really got it. But in the end, I ended up using a company that wasn't American because the other company was, and it still had this natural tinge and tendency to try to go in this like Southern home comforts realm. And I was like, this would be beautiful if I was an adopted child of a white Southern mom. We could totally go there. I didn't grow up with a porch and sun tea and all that stuff. So like, this is going to be real weird. And the English agency had no context of the American tradition. So they listened to me and just listened to the fact that we were, a fighter brand, that it was diverse and that we were for the people and we just want to make biscuits better. The mission was there and the drive was there and they just listened. And that was critical to my decision in choosing them, right? So again, going back to the advice I give is constantly find the person who listens to who you want to be, or no, not who you want to be, who you are. And that is the most important thing because the wannabe thing becomes very challenging too. Anyone could dress you up like a Coke, right? Like, are you that? Are you going to prove that? No, it's who are you?
Yes. It also requires, kind of going back to finding that right partner for you. You are very honest and transparent with, there's no hidden agenda. Like you put it, you're all forward facing. If you are not an Ayeshah, you're going to need to find your Ayeshah in order to have that real conversation, right. Cause we have those conversations too, but not everybody's going to work with us. Or you're right. There's hundreds of other companies out there, but I think brand owners, we run into them a lot. The ones that can't come forward and be true to what it is, who they are, you're going to keep cycling over and over and over again. And so, like,
and I think it's important for folks in agencies like yours, right? Like, I think it's important. Don't take that client, right? Cause you got to say no because you have a brand to sell too. And that's what people like me are looking for. We're looking for agencies that have an aesthetic, that have, a certain physical attribute to them or a brand mission too, the same way that we are. If you can't tell your brand story, then how the hell do I believe you're going to tell mine? Right. And so it's really important to stay true to that and not sacrifice for a commission, right? Or a project just to get a client that, has a product line, you could do it, right? If they're not there, this is what always happens. And I hate watching it. There's a failure that happens. And then the client comes back and blames you when the originator of the problem was that you didn't have anything to give them. So they gave you whatever they could, but it's too late. Packaging's done. Brand identity is done. And now you got to spend it again. And so then you get this nasty label and you don't know what they're saying about you. So it's, it's really important too, as a creative agency, to be careful about the clients you choose in addition.
We are unique. I mean, no sales pitch here, but we are unique and we walk away from about 30 to 40% of all the conversations that we have saying is a wrong fit for a number of reasons, but you're right. I think that's just business in general. This could be packaging, ingredient suppliers, anybody. If it's not a good fit, it's okay. Like, it's not a bad thing. And I think, exactly. I think it's fair to know what that looks like on all fronts of that. When we go into, kind of coming down this path of immigrant and this fire and tenacity, where this comes from, there's this work that you are doing right now with a couple of other folks called Project Potluck. And just for those people who don't know about it, I ran into somebody yesterday that didn't, and somebody who would benefit from it. So I sent them the resources. But Project Potluck is a nonprofit leadership and mentoring program founded by people of color with a mission to help people of color build successful companies and careers in the CPG industry. Now, this was a big announcement in 2020. It was like, was it June-ish? Does that sound right? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
About June. Lots of visibility and activity. Can you share how things are going right now? Is it going the way you thought? Has it changed? Is it bigger, smaller, faster?
You know, when Ibrahim invited me to be a founding board member, and I started talking to Arnulfo as well, we all had the same lack of expectation, right? It's like, let's just do something. Everyone's sitting around talking about it. Let's just fucking do it, right? And we're like, okay, the reason I said yes to be a part of this is, you know, Ibrahim had taken such great care in coming up with 3 very tangible pillars, right? It's easy to be a mentor. It's just a matter of picking people and spending some time, right? It's easy to create a community. It can be on Facebook, it can be LinkedIn, whatever, right? It's easy to create that. And then it's easy to create opportunities to gather and grow and be with one another, right? It's like, it's not a heavy lift to figure out how to do that. So I was like, these are instantaneously positive or can easily become positive results. Very little effort. Even 50 people would have been, to me, phenomenal, right? And the sad story that I tell is I didn't even know 50 people of color in this industry. That's how sad it was. And when we started the LinkedIn group, it's for people of color only in the CPG industry. And we had to go and invite some people to get it started so that this, you know, chain reaction happened. And obviously Ibrahim and Arnulfo had started. And then I went in and I was like, shit, like, I don't know anybody different. And I felt awful. I was like, outside of my employees, I didn't know anyone to add to that conversation. And it was sad. So when there was 100 people in there, my heart was way big. And then it became 500 and I was like, oh my God, you know, it's growing very way bigger than we thought. It's amazing. And then more than that too, the ally community that's stepping up too to want to be a part of this is exponentially grown. Our mentor database is actually larger than the mentee database, which is sad because it just shows you the state of the industry. But at the same time, it's incredibly positive that there's that many people that recognize there's a problem and they want to be a part of the solution. So, you know, it's been an enlightening experience. And I think it's also been challenging because something we thought was going to be an easy, like, way for us to connect, you know, 100 and some odd people. I think we had a goal of 200 people. Right now we're actually over, you know, 3x. So we had a goal of 200 people and we thought, oh, this is easily manageable via, you know, email and the traditional thing. Well, now when you have 1,000 people, right? Like, it's like, shit, you got to have systems, you got to have tech, you got to, you know, now all of a sudden it's becoming bigger than you know, we're 3 CEOs.
You have a real day job.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's a beautiful thing, right? It's a great problem to have. And I think, you know, for 2021, the big goal is like, let's create something that is easier to manage and hand it off to someone who can administer this in real time and, you know, be a foundational part of what that becomes. So very exciting times. And I'm blessed to be a part of this organization. I've met so many amazing people. I have 3 people that I'm mentoring now as part of this. And it's, I've got 2 gorgeous African-American CEO founder females and 1 Latina, and they're all in, food, 1 in baking, 1 in ice cream, 1 in sustainable, vegan, food. So it's been a beautiful exchange of female BIPOC power. And I love watching and seeing them grow and, you know, try to help them on their missions and vice versa. We're all helping each other in many ways. So that's been fabulous. We've kicked off a series of community events. They always end with a little bit of a mixer where we meet new people and, you know, ask all these right questions. And it's great because the community is also thinking about what they want and telling us. So it's growing very fast.
Another one of my secret missions, is trying to increase the number of women of color and disability and LGBTQ on my show. Because as I started looking around at the people that I knew that were in leadership roles, entrepreneurial roles in food and beverage, it was very white. Even the women in the industry was very Caucasian, and and I thought to myself, well, how can we possibly, as a naturals industry, help people of color and families of color and people with disabilities who have bigger health needs in general, if we don't have anybody in leadership that understands what that world really looks like that, we can go and spins and Nielsen's our data, all we want, but to have the legitimate POV is important. And so it's fascinating to see like Project Potluck growing and growing and growing. I mean, even at 1,000, that's still small when you think of how big the industry is, but
Totally.
really excited about that. And I just love that on your website, on the Mason Dixie website, for those of you that are listening, you have this little BIPOC brunch kit that with a couple of, you have definitely brands that I know of. I know a lot of the founder owners, but the fact that you have bean fields and a dozen cousins on there, I'm just like, that's just so rad. And I love that kind of nod to the community contribution without it being like this big marketing, I'm doing this for Project Potluck. It's just like, this is what you do.
This is what you do. It's not that hard, folks. And that's the thing. It just shows you the beautiful synergy that there is between all of our companies, right? I mean, in that bundle, there's, I think, 2 Asian owned, 2 Black owned, 2 Latino owned. And it's like, it ain't that hard, folks. You just got to do your research. Stop doing the same old, same old. Like, get out there, branch out a little bit. They're not selling anything that tastes like shit. It's all amazing stuff too. That's the other thing, right? So it doesn't hurt you as a brand to ally with them because they're good. They're actually good. They're actually selling something that you want to buy. So it was just easy, right? I mean, like, and scattered throughout, our site on the other bundles too. We did as much mix and match with other brands as we could. Like, we've got Pipcorn, which is also Black and Latino owned, and we got Partake, Black woman owned. I mean, it's not that hard, guys. Just pick themes, share the wealth. Why not?
Well, I am absolutely in alignment with this kind of community building, this organic community building. And I, as we're talking about this a little bit more, I wonder, you've got these people that you're mentoring. You're obviously talking to loads of other women. Are you seeing anything consistently that they're crashing into, or any kind of internal hurdles that you're just like, okay, if I could just offer this like one bit of advice to all y'all out there, it's like, this is what I would say.
I think one of the hardest things to manage, I think, as a person who is of any minority status, right? You've always been taught to fight harder. You've always been taught to, again, have the arguments ready, stand your ground. But the problem becomes when you don't listen, right? So it's really easy to not take advice or feedback, to let your ideas become priority over reality, right? And I think I frequently say it's one thing to ask for advice, it's another to actually use it. And being an active listener and being able to utilize the resources that people are giving and the time they're giving to making things happen is just as important as the idea itself. And growth only happens if you're able to absorb and take feedback and it's not, and I hate when people say, can you take feedback, or are you critical, or critical feedback, and I'm like, it's not even about, don't label it, just fucking listen, right? Like just absorb the information and do with it what you will. I don't, I don't care what happens with the information I give you, but it's like, if I'm going to have the same conversation over and over again, it's hard, because then you're like, okay, who else is there that, the resources could have been used on that's going to make a change? And again, it's not a knock. It's something I think we're all conditioned to do as women or people of color or immigrant. We're conditioned to stand your ground. Don't let anybody get in there. If it's your idea, hold on to it. Yes, absolutely. But to grow, you also have to change. You have to shift. You have to mold yourself. So you have to take constructive feedback as an opportunity to grow what you're trying to do. So that's something I think it's hard. It's hard because, again, it's horrible saying it out loud sometimes, because I know the root cause of this issue is the lack of access to begin with. If you had mentors and access to information earlier on, you'd be more used to and accustomed and trained to being, you know what I mean? But when you don't have that, and the first time you get it, someone's trying to help, but it sounds like you're changing me. You're telling me what to do. That's hard to take in and process. So it's difficult, but it's, sometimes you got to break the bone, move it, and put it back in place,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Just as like, I'm feeling a little Oprah. I've got another aha there. I don't have her $7,000 frames on today, but I love me little Oprah. Okay. So as we're kind of coming to the end, and I feel like you and I could probably have several drinks at a bar sometime somewhere and just talk
Hopefully.
more one day.
Yes.
What other women out there? Who are the women out there that you're watching that you're excited about what they're doing? And it could be in category or out of category. It could be anybody, but I wonder if there's somebody that in particular you want to elevate, or just somebody in general that you're like, yeah, I really love what this person is doing right now.
Oh, just one, huh? Well, I mean, let me think here, because now I'm like, I hate putting people on blast too if they're not ready for it. But one of the women I will say is killing it is this woman Angela. I'm working with at Females in Food. She's started an organization to promote community, right, with women in the food industry. She kind of started in the whole ingredient component space, and then realized all of a sudden there were more people outside of that industry that now want in, and her group is growing rapidly, and the interest groups and now she's got like grocery buyers, and like she's rapidly expanded, and she's done a phenomenal job of keeping up and trying to, again, create the system, all the stuff we're going through at Potluck. She did it first, and she's done it incredibly well, and she asked for help, and she absorbs every word, and in her own way, she comes up with a way to do it even 10 times better than I imagined she would. So she's phenomenal. And, her organization, Females in Food Community, is doing incredibly well. And she's somebody to watch and look out for. She'd actually probably be a good person to talk to on this.
Maybe you'll have to make that intro for me.
I will.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, before we end, I always have a few questions that I pretty much ask everybody. And before I ask that, I too have to ask you about biscuit jam. I'm so sorry. In doing my research, I don't know how far back I ended up going, but I saw biscuit jam and I was like, sign me up. And then I was like, what? It only happened, I think, once or something like that.
It was, yeah. It was just an anniversary celebrate. When you're a small business and things are going well, you want to celebrate with the world. And to us at that time, it was the world of DC and the community of supporters we had. And, we had this amazing grassroots following and phenomenal engagement with our fans. So we were like, oh, why don't we just put on this local community event? And that's how I met Molly. She really helped me pull together kind of how to get this to be even more grassroots and not just, another, Coachella type thing, right? I wanted it to just be organically, what it was. If you want to come sell food, just come sell food. There's no charge. Just do it. If you want to be an artist, come, we're going to pay you, so that was a really fun event. And we just did it once because it was our anniversary. The world's changed now, and unfortunately community events aren't exactly in-person community events aren't as feasible anymore, but it was a lot of fun. I loved it. And I think one of the best things that's happened too is we tried to make it family friendly. So we had a lot of like indie or like bluegrass, safe genres, but we also had this phenomenal group called Oh He Dead. And they had this gorgeous, amazing, Black female singer. And they had like these guys that were in the band, phenomenally good. And I think they were just voted like in some big like indie magazine thing, they were like voted best band. So they too have kind of risen to the ranks and climbed. So it's kind of cool to see that.
That just looked like so much fun. And
it was, it was hot though, girl. It was like 100,000 degrees that day. So I was miserable.
Let's not do that. What, DC, and it was in July, right?
August. It was hot. Yeah. Yeah. But turnout was great. I think it was 900 people. And I mean, with no shade. So, you know,
Do it again. Do it again when you're ready. I'll be there. I will
we will.
fly
We
out.
will.
I will take tickets. I'll do whatever. That sounded amazing. Hey, tell me a little bit of, I always like a little like fact or either about the industry or about like just some sort of like, hey, I heard about this company and did you know that there's 400 shades of orange lipstick or something like that? I don't know if you have any kind of fun fact about your business or about your background that you'd like to
Oh, wow.
share.
Oh, girl. Fun facts. Um, well, okay. I mean, I'll do science fact, right? Because most people actually don't know this. But really until recently, most breads have been that are chemically leavened were actually chemically leavened with aluminum. So people, have literally been sucking down aluminum for the last like 40 years, and it's still prevalent in most chemically. If you're not using yeast, they're using aluminum. And oh yeah, and similarly, like even in icing, for example, there's titanium in it because people want to keep it nice and white. So like the amount of harmful metals that the human consumer has been consuming over the course of the last 30 years is pretty volatile, which is another reason why this business is so important to me, right? And it's a hard fact we never really get to share because then it gets into like the nerd sciences and then you lose people. But it's one of the central missions of like why we try to clean up our label to the biggest extent possible, right? Like we were the first to eliminate aluminum in biscuits, and we are the first to eliminate titanium in our icing and our rolls. So yeah, so it's important for people to understand the science of what they're eating too. I think that's one of the big pieces of advice I'd give to anyone, but specifically, folks in our BIPOC community or people of color communities, because there's too much trust still in that what you're eating is, if it says natural, it is. No, you got to watch the label. There's still people doing crazy stuff.
Wow. Okay. Uh-huh. And along that line, then, do you have any brands or trends that you're kind of keeping your eyeball on right now? Anything that's interesting for you?
Well, I definitely think anything in the whole, THC CBD world is very interesting. The world of applications people are putting this in is phenomenally interesting. But to me, I think it's so much safer and better than cigarettes and beer. So to me, I think it's a huge opportunity. The other thing I think is really interesting, and I never really understood until I met Denise at Partake, who I know you've talked to, is the number. And this goes back to bread too. This is a common misconception. A lot of people think they need to eat gluten free because they're allergic to bread or gluten, and it's not the case. You're allergic to some shitty byproduct that's been put in it, right? So the problem is that the human bodies and the rate of allergens and allergic reactions in children today is growing rapidly. And I strongly believe it's because we in our generation are consuming absolute shit. So the whole allergen friendly trend, I think, is here to stay and very beneficial, because I think it's only aiding people to really look at labels closely and really understand what's in there, and realize that it's not going to go anytime soon, because we've damaged the current mothers of this generation have been kind of damaged by what we were consuming as children. So very important.
Yeah, I agree. And it kind of you probably have a little bit of saving grace in that, because my mother was an immigrant, I didn't eat anything that was produced until it was all
Mm-hmm.
homemade. Literally
Mm-hmm.
everything was
Mm-hmm.
homemade until I moved out of the house. And
Same.
yeah,
Same.
so
And that is something interesting too, because I don't know if you've ever found this, but I actually think that more allies and just in general, white Americans really need to look at immigrant populations for health and natural living, because they've been preconditioned and always have eaten that way. And the way they eat is what we should be learning from, instead of invented, like you said, like Frankenfoods, right? Like that's one way at it. Or you could just go ask an African how they've been getting nutrients out of like very few growable things, So that's the kind of dynamic that needs to change. Is that communication stream needs to be opened up dramatically. We're a country full of immigrants and second generations that are not far from knowing what that's like.
yes, and farming practices, which is a whole nother
Oh, girl. Yeah.
Oh, all right. Before we go, tell me, what do you do to keep yourself sane right now?
Oh, I go on walks. Obviously, indoors is getting old, and hitting the gym is monotonous. So it's been nice as a CEO, and in times like this, it's nice to get a walk in the middle of the day and get your head clear and come back to the desk kind of refreshed and get some fresh air, some vitamin D. So I highly recommend.
Well, Asha, that's the end of our time. I have loved the process of learning about you prior to today, and today I'm just super thrilled. I think lots of good aha moments for loads of people, and for us to keep kind of just continually pushing that naturals industry to be doing the best work for everybody. And I really thank you for that POV.
Well, thank you for doing what you're doing, because I think it's important that you're spreading the word and doing it in the most just and glorified way possible. So I appreciate the time, Diana.
This episode is sponsored by Retail Voodoo, a creative marketing firm specializing in growing, fixing, and reinventing brands in the food, beverage, wellness, and fitness industries. If your naturals brand is in need of positioning, package design, or marketing activation, we're here to help. You can find more information at retail-voodoo.com. And so there you go. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel and share with your network. Until next time, be well and do gooder.